So, for those of you that have been to MKAI before, welcome back. You're in the right place. And I know that you're going to be contributing and you'll be doing what you do best, which is getting on that chat and asking those questions, making those points, challenging what you hear. This is a democracy, this is a community, and we're all here together. And that's why we're still on Zoom, so that we can all see each other and we're not on some platform when we're all hidden from view on purpose. For those who haven't been before, so massively welcome. I see Doug's here from Microsoft. Hey Doug, Jack's here, Luke's here, so many familiar faces, that's wonderful. So first time, get involved as well. Sort of moderate yourself in a sense. If you want to unmute and you want to say something, you want to ask a question, we can live with that, we can go with the flow. We've got a lot to cram in 2 hours, but make it your own. Enjoy. So great to see everybody. So tonight, we, as a community, we kind of get stuck on how do we stop AI from doing bad things? How do we stop it from being biased when it comes to facial recognition, or what was all the Minority Report stuff this last week, catching criminals without even them doing anything, autonomous weapons, automated mortgage decisions. We seem to be trying to stop AI looking really bad at the moment. Give me a nod if that rings a bell from all the press. Okay. Yeah, see a few nods. So it's right to point these things out. They are riddled with bias. It's shown up more than ever in the Black Lives Matter that we're contemplating and engaging with at the moment. The errors, the risks, frankly, sometimes we wonder if they're even worth it when the benefits seem to be so far outweighed by the biases and the risks. So we can take that and we can put that in a pocket for tonight, because having taken advice from the community from MKAI, I wanted to switch gears tonight because there is so much going on for AI for good. And that's what I wanted to focus us on tonight. So you talk about whatever you want, but we're trying to stay a little bit away from the ethics, the trust, the transparency, the moderation, the regulation, the legislation, and instead have a look at what is being done right now. What are the AI for good stories all over the world? And you'll hear from speakers from all 4 corners of this planet. How is AI being applied to change lives for the better? How is it improving equality? How is it making this world a little brighter and a little fairer? And that is our focus for tonight. We can't do this without fantastic supporters, not just the wonderful people that are here tonight and have engaged with all the content recently, but 2 of our corporate partners as well. The first is we're very privileged to be supported by Data Reply UK, so I'll definitely give a quick shout out for them at the moment. They're part of the Reply Group, a big multi-million-dollar company based out of Italy originally, but this is Data Reply UK. So they're doing advanced analytics, AI-powered data services. They're basically helping digital leaders, chief officers, to achieve meaningful outcomes through effective use of data. Anybody on this call, give me a nod again to know how hard it is to do exactly that, effectively use the data in the businesses. So that's what they do. They'll help companies design, implement human-centered data products, turning ideas into enterprise solutions using big data engineering, data science, IPA, intelligent process automation. So if that sounds something that's of interest or you want to get in touch with them, their website, www.reply.com, and that's /data-reply. So reply.com /data-reply. Super nice guys. They'd love to hear from you. And the second is Amy. And Amy loved to share their own story. So I'm not going to do that for them. And I'm going to invite, I believe, Jack Lordson to introduce Amy for a few minutes.
No, you are indeed. And thank you very much, Richard. I'd say just take this opportunity to thank you for making me feel very welcome across the wider MKAI opportunities. Community, as well. This is obviously new to me. It's my first MKAI, but I was lucky enough to be on the Barrels podcast with you, Richard, Rue, David and John earlier in the week, and actually from that I can tell that you were in for a fascinating day, and I'm really looking forward to this. So this is obviously new for me, as is Milton Keynes to Amy. I think it's something that we've been always wanting to do for a long time. I know Luke has been attending MKAI for much longer than I have, that's for sure. I'm sure many of you are aware of Luke. So as a company, we moved into Milton Keynes and a lovely new office on Elbury Boulevard in March this year. And that's something that sort of we've been planning on doing for a long time. I think we've had Luke with us for about a year now, and we've always had the idea in our heads that we wanted to move to Milton Keynes for long before that. And finally, we've been able to make it a reality. Unfortunately, it's been cut short by COVID-19, but I'm hoping that we will be able to get back to Milton Keynes before too long. Although on a day like today, I would take anywhere with air conditioning. So I think it's a big moment for us actually moving to Milton Keynes, sort of as a company and as our personal journey. A bit like how moving a house is a big step for anyone. I think moving out and moving to Milton Keynes is something we really take with both reins. I think the community and things like MKAI going on in Milton Keynes is exactly the reason why we're so excited to have a nice base in somewhere as lovely and well located as well, of course, as Milton Keynes. So I suppose to give you a little bit more idea about us as a company, historically we've sort of come from two consulting practices, those being data, sort of where I come from, and the content side as well. So I think things like document management, content server, Microsoft SharePoint, that kind of world. Broadly speaking, information management, which of course I believe both key into. And if you look at our journey as a company today, we're actually pouring our passion from both sides of that business. So from content, from documents, from information, and data, obviously data science, data engineering, architecture, and AI, into our product, which is Insight Maker. Insight Maker is an information discovery platform. Actually, it brings together information and data from both structured and unstructured repositories, allowing people to navigate those together seamlessly as if they are the same, which is something that I do feel really passionately about. You look at a document, it's got words in it, yeah, people see that as content, even a picture. Actually, why can't that be data? And AI is obviously a big part of trying to fathom this information that is so granular that, you know, a computer typically might be able to understand it. But obviously, as a human, we see, well, yes, there is information there, and let's process it and let's bring this together. So an example of how we do that at the moment is through our enterprise search functionality. And we look to bring out entities in documents. So obviously entity extraction is a big field. You can start from the really basic stuff. So when we're talking about entities, we could be talking about postcodes or invoice numbers or phone numbers or anything like that. And you would build up a regular expression, right? This is what a postcode looks like. This is what a phone number looks like. Go away and find them, right? And obviously that's relatively easy for one to wrap their head around. But when you start to look at things like, okay, go and find me a name. A name, is that a name of a person, a name of an organization? In what context is it being used? Are they a vendor? Or these are the questions which actually, to a human, are really easy to answer, but to a computer are a lot more difficult. And this is sort of where we're trying to focus our research, which is a big part of what we do and why we love to be able to outreach to communities like this and actually try our best to stay on the cutting edge. So once you'll be able to build those algorithms using something called name density recognition or indeed more advanced techniques, you can actually start to bring all that stuff together. You can say, right, this document, this has, you know, this person in it, this invoice. Actually, you can start to then invert connections between documents and data sets. So as a user, your experience can be enhanced. You can navigate, you can find an invoice, you can find, right, what's that invoice for? What's the product? Who's ordered it? Where's the delivery note for this? And actually, Insight Maker can recommend you those things for you on your journey to aid you. And it's also AI for good, I suppose, not in the grand moral sense, but certainly in that it's there to help you do your job within Insight Maker. I truly believe in the vision for that product. So I suppose I could yabber on for days about natural language processing, entity extraction, and all of that good stuff. But I should let you crack on with the other things. Obligatory plug is Luke has a workshop on the technical track, I believe at 5:30, where he will be going into detail about natural language processing. I suppose from the context of how we use it within Insight Maker, but also from first principles. So if that is your sort of technical cup of tea, I couldn't recommend that more highly.
Jack, thank you so much. And you're right, AI for good doesn't mean have to be AI for big. There's lots of wonderful things that happen at smaller scale. And don't worry, I'll be talking about Luke's session in a little bit later on after we hear from John in a moment. But thank you, and thanks for your support from your great company as well. And more people logged in. Wonderful to see you. Bobby's here, Can's here, Wayne's here, Hamid's here, Trish is here. This is great to see so many faces. We've just hit 100 people tonight. Not bad on the hottest day of the year here in the UK. So there's a reason why John, who is just over there for me, has darkness outside, because he's sitting in Kenya, of course, where nighttime has come in. And John is our first speaker, John Camera, tonight. And I'll give him a little bit of intro and then ask him to open up his mic and talk to us, because I mean, he's delivered multi-million-dollar global projects for 15 years now, so he's done all that. He's worked with the likes of 360bet, Global Gaming, in Google, 888, and now he's doing some slightly different things. He's the founder of Afya Record, which means health record, and this is a health tech platform, and he's also the non-exec director of the Machine Learning Institute of Africa. Very, very much involved and associated with Africa, amongst other countries. He was the chief strategist of the team that introduced the Global Good Project to the Nigerian government. That was via the Office of the Vice President and the Minister for Agriculture and Health. He's also involved in advisory roles in projects in Kenya, Ghana, Uganda, and Nigeria. So I'm sure you're getting a flavor as to why I really wanted John to come and speak to us. As I said, he's sitting in Nairobi at the moment. You can find him in the UK and in Ireland as well across the year, once we're all traveling again. And I want John to get real with us. John and I have touched base. We've been on podcasts together. And I know that he's quite outspoken in a really positive way about the implications of the opportunities in Africa for data and for AI, and how it's just not as simple as going in there and trying to run programs. So John's going to lay that bare for us and give us his opinions and thoughts on that and share some of his work. So John, the stage is yours. It's 5:15. It's yours for 20 minutes. We look forward to hearing from you. John, welcome.
Thanks very much, Richard. Pleasure to meet you all. And my name is John Kamara, as Richard has said. I am the founder for Afya Record here in Nairobi. I am also director for the Nelson Mandela University, which is a PhD university in Arusha, and also the Machine Learning Intelligence Institute of Africa as well. I think I'm going to just quickly touch around, dive right in and touch around AI and the challenges, the opportunities, and why we believe AI is a huge part of the growth of 4IR in Africa at the minute. Seated here in Nairobi, we started a health tech company. And the reason behind starting a health tech company was for us to be able to create a situation where we can actually create a seamless flow of data for health, so that patients who are at the core and the center of healthcare can actually access their health data and use it to find health services and access healthcare anywhere, anytime. And the reason why is because the three key problems we have in healthcare in Africa, one is infrastructure, which are hospitals. We don't have enough, and we never will. It's just not possible. Resources, most of our resources are really smart doctors and nurses. They all travel to Europe or America because they get better jobs and get paid more money. So it's very difficult for us to keep these resources here. So the only other way, the third part of the problem is data. And data, which also then involves decision intelligence, machine learning. If we're able to harness data properly, we might be able to solve the other two problems a little bit, because then we can use data to solve the problem of less doctors, because doctors will have more time. And we can also use that to solve the problem of infrastructures, because we can do a lot of telehealthcare services without people necessarily going to the hospital. So, but the idea was to basically build a solution that gives the patient access to their data and puts them at the center of that, and then creating a machine learning solution that allows us to manage healthcare. So what do we say in practicality is data in Africa exists and it doesn't exist. It exists because it's everywhere on the mobile phones that we use. We can access data. People build platforms, and in less than months, we just built a platform, and in less than a few weeks of beta testing, we have over a couple thousand people who are already hitting the platform without any marketing and without a lot of work done. So we haven't even hit town yet. We have over 45 hospitals that we're onboarding in less than 3 weeks of being live. But the problem with all this is this data that exists, but first of all, is not captured in the right manner for even to become machine learning readable. It's not captured in the right format for it to actually become usable. Now, the reason why machine learning becomes extremely important in healthcare is because we're able to use it to model diseases. And the key part of disease modeling is allowing us to understand the prevalences of specific type of diseases based on location, the type of genetic components of the individual, and also the different cultural nuances and the lifestyles of people, and how that affects, the different types of diseases that are very paramount in numerous parts of Africa. And a lot of people, look at this and say, it's impossible for us to do this because there is no access to data. But the opportunity that machine learning presents us is if we can collect this data in the right format, we'll actually be able to help the health infrastructure. We'll also be able to help a lot of patients with chronic illnesses to actually begin to solve some of these problems and create, some more precision medicine and some better solutions around how our doctors actually provide healthcare and provide a learning ecosystem using machine learning based on understanding of data. And I'll give you some examples. We were recently in one of the counties here in Kenya, and we were being asked a question: what is the prevalence of infection in pregnant women who are under 30 years old? And how do you use machine learning to help us understand a little bit better about this, what we can do, time, at what moment should we intervene? A number of very, very dynamic, granular questions. And nobody could answer that because we had no data. And this is where very basic machine learning, we're not even talking about deep learning or quantum machine learning or as deep as you put, very basic modeling around machine learning based on the use cases of clear and accurate data can help us actually increase the opportunity to save the lives of people in rural communities by up to 8.5% on a very minimal scale without applying too much. So then you go into financial services where, the digitization of the financial ecosystem has made it slowly possible for a few folks who, over 70% of the population, who have zero access to financial inclusion or access to financial wealth based on the fact that they have no digital footprint, can't access financial service. And now with that digitizing of information and being able to create, again, very basic modeling around credit facilities, dynamic pricing, precision marketing for individuals, we can actually begin to create value for each person and be able to actually help people attract more value from what they do. So I'll give you, again, practical examples. You run savings group. There are a number of savings group schemes that happen across multiple countries in Africa. And some of these women are really, really strong at saving money in the informal sector. Now, the moment we're able to take this informal sector economy, create visibility for the accumulated wealth that exists, and then begin to do very simple modeling around business intelligence, very simple modeling around credit scoring that provides value for that individual using simple machine learning programming tools, we're actually able to give somebody a little bit more value into their lives. Just those very, very simple modules that we create. Then we go into environmental science and management, where we work with the Nelson Mandela University to do a number of studies around water purification and using data collected from deep science to understand the prevalence of certain type of diseases based on water-borne, water-infected areas of different markets in Africa, Sierra Leone, DRC, and a few of these markets. Now you begin again to look at how do you use machine learning to extract some very simplistic knowledge around what you should do to be able to actually purify water and to be able to serve the right type of value proposition to the people who live in those communities as well. So again, with the right set of data and very simple levels of machine learning, we can actually provide a better service to so many people across so many markets without necessarily going deep into what I call good to have problems that we have in Europe. I lived in Dublin, so for a very long time. And a lot of the solutions that we solved There's a lot of really good to have convenience issues. But here, you now deal with very basic problems that most people, it's quite hard for them to comprehend except you actually come down. So when you start thinking about the value of machine learning in some of these ecosystems, you understand that the access to data, it's there. It's everywhere here right now because the mobile phone has given us the opportunity to access data anytime, anyhow, and faster than anywhere else in the world. Maybe just Asia is the only place that's faster than Africa in terms of access to data using the mobile phone. The collection of that data, the accuracy of the data, and the ability for that data to become machine readable is the first problem that we solve. Then the second problem is, can we use that data now that we have cleaned the data, made it machine learning readable? Can we use that data to actually extract certain results and outcomes that change the lives of people? And the answer is yes. So in terms of looking at the issues, we were just on a UN panel recently talking about the governance and all these things. And we have to bring everybody back to, is machine learning valuable to a continent like Africa? Is it possible that we can use machine learning, AI, to leapfrog a number of the problems that we face in terms of learning and education and continuous learning in an ecosystem where we're now able to extract so many levels of information from different people, and somebody else can learn without necessarily having to see the other person, and use this machine learning tools to create continuous awareness around knowledge programs? Yes, we can. Can we use it to solve problems in the healthcare sector where we have very little hospitals, very little resources, and we have access to data? If we collect this data right, and we build very basic modeling, we can actually provide first-line diagnostics to people in real time. And then we can actually give our doctors, our nurses, more time to actually deal with the real problem, the bigger problems, the bigger issues. There's one doctor in places like the DRC, Guinea, Mali, to almost 17,000 people. So when would the doctor have the time to treat everybody properly? It's impossible. No matter how many, and then if you build hospitals, no matter how many hospitals you build, you still have the problem of connectivity, managing the hospitals, and the hospitals are in rural communities. So we've just launched a few digital health programs just as test cases, and then providing these doctors again with access to the data, and then providing them with simple tools that they can run correlation. So we call it, what does Ebola look like when it meets diabetes? What does malaria look like when it meets HIV? Let us run a correlation around those symptoms, around those keywords, around what the outcome would look like, and then let us create a model that can give this doctor the opportunity to say, okay, boom, in 1 second, I kind of know what to do. And I can share this within an ecosystem of learning as well, which is some of the tools that we then provide for the rest of the doctors in that ecosystem to then say, well, I know what this doctor did about 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 months ago. The information is visible, is accessible, and I can also apply this same model, which I don't have to go and think about, to also help me, because learning is also a problem. Because I'm a doctor and I've probably not retrained myself for the past 5, 6 years because I have no time. I mean, we've met nurses in different parts of the continent who literally haven't retrained themselves since 1999. Now, that nurse has no knowledge of a lot of the things that you're talking about. They're still working under the thought processes in which they left nursing school from. The world has moved on. So how do you get this person a higher level of learning in a very short space of time? This is part of why we feel that machine learning here in this continent, the opportunity that it provides for us, the access it provides for us, and how we can actually use this to create a higher value proposition for people who live in the bottom of the pyramid without them necessarily having to overspend and also worry about what we call ethical AI or the governance of ethical AI and all this big other stuff that we talk about. So, and in conclusion, I want to sort of like go into disease monitoring, which is a big thing now that we are also seeing here in Africa because COVID is a situation. But obviously, COVID, the whole world has focused on COVID, and we're all trying to develop machine learning tools for COVID or AIs. But we've had Ebola, we've had cholera, we've had dengue fever. I can keep naming them over the past year alone that has killed millions more people. But nobody has worried about developing any real machine learning tool using those data sets to see how we can help manage these outbreaks that are consistently killing people. But because COVID affects everybody else in the world, so I think maybe this is an opportunity for the rest of the world then to say, okay, you know what? Don't just develop a solution for COVID. Look at developing a solution for outbreaks in general. And look at how you can help these economies here in Africa to actually develop, solutions around machine learning or monitoring or disease surveillance for other types of outbreak that are actually killer outbreaks compared to what COVID is at the minute. So part of what we're doing, our philosophy at the Machine Learning Institute is three things. First of all, education, awareness, developing a number of AI engineers here. We have a shortage. In Kenya, we can probably count the amount of really solid AI engineers we have in Nigeria. And so we're hugely involved in creating a whole infrastructure for data science. And then from them, taking people to become, and while we're doing that, we can actually train them in the ethical models of the things that they actually need to create that makes sense. So for me, I am, we talk about agriculture, we just had massive low-cost infestation across Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And if a number of understanding, the climatic conditions, understanding the data sets around agricultural awareness, understanding the data sets around, the shift in movement of insects could have actually helped us predict some of these particular values, right? Which we can then use to say, okay, farmers, this is what you should do. Farmers, this is how you should do it. So again, agriculture in Africa is leveraging AI quite a lot. Because we now see farmers who are now understanding what to grow, how to grow it, the type of seeds to grow. And while the farming season is happening, also using very simple machine learning tools and data collected with IoT devices in real time to say, okay, well, this is what should happen, and this is how you can mitigate some of the problems that are happening in real time. So if I was to give a yay or nay for us, at this particular time in the history of Africa, or in the history of some of the markets that we're involved in, machine learning is actually a super positive thing in terms of how we catch up with the rest of the world, and how we also are able to leverage the opportunity and the access to data that we currently have in the continent at the minute.
John, thank you. Thank you so much. Untapped resource of a whole different kind. That was a spellbinding talk. Thank you so much. And now that you've paused for breath, do have a look at some of those comments that have been coming through about your words, people being inspired. There's one or two questions there. So if I can ask you to kind of tune into some of that and answer some of those as well in the next few minutes, if you don't mind.
Somebody just said, do we need a solution for COVID? Yes and no. We need a solution for disease management, and we need a solution for disease surveillance, not just COVID. See, I'm really not the opinion that COVID has triggered something in everybody. So I would employ people, if you're really looking to provide solutions, then look at the different diseases that is killing people consistently in this continent. And I can name a number of them for you. I've just named Ebola. We actually started this whole research last year, September, because of Ebola. What does Ebola and HIV look like in Sierra Leone? That is a big problem. What does Ebola and cancer look like in the DRC? So that is what I would say makes a lot more sense. COVID is yes, it's an outbreak, and we are also facing it here at everybody else, but I still believe that there is the opportunity to use that now to really dig deeper and begin to see what are the solutions, how can we provide a more agnostic solution around disease management. Somebody also asked a question about, edge computing ML on devices. It's a massive opportunity because, this device literally rules the world for us. Literally everything that we do is based around. So machine learning on devices and the intelligent machine learning to allow devices to become more opportunity driven, and even creating AI solutions that become human-based AI that allows me as a person to make the right type of decisions, especially in the fintech space, is something that most companies here in Africa need at the minute. If you look at the opportunity that exists in the financial service space in machine learning, it's really actually very simple. What is dynamic pricing, and what is dynamic credit scoring, and not what is real-time NPL?
John, thank you again. We're going to keep running onto schedule, but if you want to go into that chat, if you don't mind, maybe typing some more responses out, that would be amazing. I don't know how we do standing ovation here on Zoom, but brilliant talk, and enjoy reading some of those comments as well about how much that's been enjoyed. Maybe one or two contacts in there for you as well, people that maybe have some ideas or are looking for some collaboration. So, John, how do people get a hold of you?
I'm going to drop my email there as well. Perfect.
Okay. John, you've just thanked me as opposed to everybody, so do send that message again and send it to the group. So that's John. Right, we move from Africa right across to Baltimore now, when I invite Dave Troy to speak in a moment. But before that, we have a choice, which it could be challenging to make this choice, actually, because we're going to open up a breakout room in just a moment, because this is where we can have two options. So in the breakout room, we're going to have Luke Rollins, who was mentioned earlier on. He's data scientist over at Amy. I'll give him a little bit of background now. His core interest is natural language processing. We know it as NLP, with his dissertation paper on machine learning methods for sentiment analysis. So he's going to be over in that room doing about an hour, introducing us to NLP, some of the fundamental methods that are used to tackle the problems. You're going to learn some of the theory, and you're going to see some of the code as well for a sentiment analysis model and how that can be trained right from scratch. He'll be using a real-world data set that he's going to pull in from IMDb, something that we all know, which of course is the movie review website. So I'm sure that sounds extremely good to quite a few people on this call. But I'll still be here, and I'll be on what we call the kind of main stage, which is where we talk about the big stuff and the strategy. And I'll be here with Dave Troy. So I'll give Dave Troy his intro, then we'll split, and then we'll come back and I'll set Dave up again for success. But Dave's an entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur, and a disinformation researcher. So he started studying social media data 13 years ago. And he was acknowledged as one of the first developers to use the Twitter API, which is pretty cool. So his data visualization work has been featured at exhibitions like Design and the Elastic Mind at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, and also at TED. So he's based in Maryland. He serves as CEO for 410 Labs, which make the popular email tools Maelstrom and Chuck. But in the area of disinformation research, his focus of his work has been on the intersection between sociology, network science, and political science. So when you hear about somebody working on a hotbed like that, you want to bring him in to talk about it. So I've asked Dave to reflect on that research in the context of what we are going through and what we've been going through with COVID-19, with that interface with the pandemic, disinformation, and politics. So I'm going to just cancel the spotlight here for John. So just recap there. You've got the breakout room about to open with Luke, and you've got here, but you'll need to come back here to come in here, Dave. So I'm going to assign everybody now to the room. Just hit exit the room. Ellen will be in there to help you as well. Come back and we'll start in about a minute. Okay, I think that Zoom has changed its control and command, because some people didn't leave, so I think they've swapped things around, but I see some people coming back now as well. We're in for a great session on this side. I'm very glad to see Dave coming back. That's very good news. Dave, I'm going to unmute you now, or ask to unmute you there. And I'm going to open up the share screen for you. We'll just give it 30 seconds or so. Dave, make sure everybody's where they want to be. Dave, how was my intro for you there? What have I missed off?
Oh, that was perfect. I'm one of these people that's got their fingers in a lot of different things. So that's both good and bad, and that I see across a lot of different disciplines and stuff, but there's a lot going on at a given time. So yeah, I thought it covered the bases pretty well.
Great. Dave, why don't you dive in? So it's just gone 36 there. If you can run for just a smidge under 20 minutes,
Sure.
if possible, to keep us on time.
Yep.
Welcome.
Yeah, glad to be here, Richard. Thank you very much for the great introduction. So are you able to see that presentation properly?
Looks good to me, yeah.
Okay, great. So again, my name's Dave Troy, and as Richard said, I'm the CEO of a company called 410 Labs based in Baltimore, Maryland. And I have been for the last 4 years or so really focused on a lot of information regarding or research involving misinformation and disinformation. So just to be really clear for the purposes of this talk, misinformation is false information that is not necessarily intended to cause harm. This might be like medical misinformation telling you that you can cure yourself of COVID by gargling bleach or whatever the lie of the day is. This kind of stuff is not often produced with an intent to harm, but is often just kind of floating out in the wild, sometimes with the intent of making money. And then disinformation is information that was created and promoted with the intention of causing harm. So this idea of intent is kind of key to understanding this field. So what kind of things are we talking about? You know, you probably heard that back in 2016, 2015 timeframe, the United States was targeted with a major disinformation attack. And this has been happening throughout the world in various kinds of capacities. Some of it, you know, coming from state sponsors like Russia and China and Iran, North Korea. But there's a lot of different flavors of it out in the world. And what I want to try to convey to you today, if you know, there's just one thing that you take away from it, is sort of what is the nature of this problem, and how do we, you know, have some chance of attacking and fixing this problem, and you know, towards that end, how might we be able to use AI as part of that process? So just to give you some sense of the backdrop of, you know, kind of what's going on in say the United States right now. Around 20% of people approve of political violence, and 25% of people approve of splitting the country in two. This was as of November 2019, and that has gotten, I would say, significantly worse now. And so what is this process that disinformation is acting on that is causing us to become so divided? And to help us understand that, I want to talk briefly about the idea of cults. So with cults, you may recognize some of these images as being familiar to you from sort of the idea of cults. On the left is Jim Jones of the People's Temple, who notoriously led 900 folks to their death in Guyana, South America, back in 1978. And then on the upper right is a still from the movie The Godfather, which you know. And if you think about what a mafia is, it is a certain kind of a cult. It is a, you know, social network that has a great deal of internal social capital, and where the rules of the group outweigh the societal concerns that the rest of us have. Likewise, on the lower right here is an image from the Salem witch trials in the United States in 1692. And this was a case of group conflict where, you know, one group had more social capital than, or had a tightly wound amount of social capital and was pitted against another group. And they got into this giant conflict where they were burning people at the stake, et cetera. So if you think about a cult as a network, and you look at it from a network science point of view, this is what a cult might look like, where you've got this very tightly knit, you know, let's say fully meshed social network, which isn't realistic, but, you know, this is an illustration, with a leader, and everybody in the network has a relationship with the leader. And these folks are sort of steeled against the world because of this very tight social relationship between them. But the real world, normal society, a healthy society might look more something like this, where each member is a part of their own little subgroup, but they have a lot of messy connections to other people that aren't like them. And there's a lot of sort of what people in the sociology field call cross-cutting social connections that help to balance people's points of view and keep them from becoming so extreme. So, you know, the process of adding disinformation into these kinds of networks tends to have this kind of an effect, where things become more and more homogenized and sorted into, you know, sort of these tightly knit groups, and they become, you know, more and more wedded to the points of view that are popular within those subgroups. So you can see some of this happening within the political realm all around the world. It's not unique to the United States. It's happening in Europe, and you saw it in the Brexit vote to some extent, where people were people in rural areas were interested in Brexit. People in urban areas were not. And ultimately, if you let this process kind of advance to its end state, you get a configuration that might look something like this, where people are fully blown apart into these separate networks and unable to bridge any of their divides. And obviously, this is an extreme example. You're never going to get to that stage. But the point is to illustrate the notion that this process can keep driving you in that general direction. So if you study cults, one of the things that you find in that realm is that you can kind of define cults by what kind of properties characterize that network. So you can see on this continuum here, this is put together by a friend of mine named Steve Hassan, who's the leading expert on cults in the world. Being able to have like real relationships, and have your own conscience and creativity and things like that, that is healthy. And that's the kind of thing you find in a non-cult configuration. On the right, you see that you have, this idea of cult identity and people being narcissistic and, going after hot doctrine and hating each other and elitism, some of these other properties here. That's more characteristic of this cult network configuration. So the thing that's kind of challenging in the prospect of, this kind of a process happening within a democracy is that individuals kind of go around telling themselves that they have agency and free will and that they are the ones that are making rational decisions with respect to democracy and democratic rule and all of that. When in fact, it's actually kind of possible to program society into these kind of fairly predictable kind of patterns and to elicit reactions from them using tools like disinformation. So, this process of getting people into these divided cliques is really radicalization. And we, typically think of that in terms of terrorists and stuff like that. But if you think about it just merely as a social and network phenomenon, it really is defined by the idea that when the in-group values for that small clique override societal values, and you decide instead to make decisions that favor your in-group versus the ones that might benefit society as a whole. So that's really what disinformation does. It divides us into these in-groups and out-groups. It hardens the boundaries between groups. It creates excess social capital, unhealthy social capital within these groups, and it can cause cognitive errors in group decision making. And by that, what I would say is, suppose, for instance, that your in-group values are that climate doesn't matter, and in fact, probably climate matters. You're going to be making mistakes about how you evaluate the world. And so this whole process, tends to turn what we think of as truth into a political position. There is no absolute truth. There's only relative, beliefs within the context of these groups. So what kinds of things are companies doing, to try to counter this? And, if you think about the kind of vectors that we have where this kind of thing is being, driven, it's social media. So companies like Facebook, right now have done not as much as they should. They are, as of a few weeks ago, not willing to take a stance on various kinds of political speech. And that while they have done, a fair amount to try to mark, advertising as being paid for by political sources and, politicians and foreigners and that kind of thing, I think there's widespread agreement that there's a lot more that Facebook could and probably should do. Twitter is maybe doing a little bit more by starting to be a little bit more aggressive about labeling certain kinds of things as false. But I think in general, we need to be thinking about how tech companies approach, the ethics of the designs of these platforms. If you think about, kind of like what's happening to us societally, there is an ethical aspect to the design of, say, computing platforms. So like the fact that you have a computing platform by itself doesn't really impose very much in the way of behaviors on top of that. It's sort of really an application layer concern that when you get into behaviors. So there's kind of at each layer of this, of the, sort of computing and networking and tech stack, there is, other kinds of things that get layered on top of that from a design standpoint that actually drive behavior. So the most extreme example that you might think of in that regard is, what kind of person does Instagram create? What kind of society does one made up of Instagram users create? What is that like? And so if you think about the kinds of behaviors that something like Instagram promotes, which is to take photos that look good but maybe are a little bit staged, or promoting consumerism, or a certain look, or that kind of thing, are those things good for society? So I think that's something that the tech world needs to be thinking about, especially as we start to layer AIs on top of things that promote certain kinds of behavior. That's a very key consideration. So then you layer on top of this the coronavirus infodemic, or coronavirus epidemic, and some people say that that's caused an infodemic of disinformation. And oftentimes with any kind of crisis, there's a wave of disinformation that will follow that. And this crisis has been no different. We've seen, this is some very early coronavirus disinformation from back in March. It's very sort of predictable that you're going to have people trying to layer this on top of political divides, because the pandemic itself has tended to, have prevalence as a function of population density, which is one of the divides that disinformation itself has been layered on. I think that in terms of good responses to sort of dealing with the information side of this, Audrey Tang in Taiwan has done a really great job of kind of rethinking this problem from the ground up. And if you don't know about Audrey Tang, she is an amazing person, digital minister in Taiwan. And what they've really tried to do is to, instead of allowing information to sort of divide people, they've worked really hard to create information that brings people together by using things like humor. So they call it humor over rumor. And when they do use humor, it's always like self-deprecating humor and like fun, zany kind of stuff, rather than trying to belittle, people that don't believe and that kind of thing. And that has been a very different kind of an approach from what we've seen in the United States, and is a much healthier counter to, kind of an information environment handling approach than what we've done. So, the goal for dealing with this whole COVID situation should be really to just maximize total health. We've gotten all kind of wound up about masks or no masks and everything else. And, there are all key aspects there that need to be managed. But in terms of creating an information environment, we need to create an information environment that allows people to accurately assess reality, avoid political framings, and we need to be able to defend against both disinformation and misinformation. So in terms of what's coming next in 2020, what's left of it, we've seen some disturbing new trends. The Kremlin's disinformation playbook, their idea of kind of using divisive content and rumors and all kinds of made up fake news type stuff has been adopted by China to some extent, and we're starting to see some overlap between China and Russia's sharing of specific narratives, and that's worth keeping an eye on. Twitter has worked to take down a whole bunch of China-linked accounts spreading disinformation on both Hong Kong and coronavirus. That was just 2 weeks ago. And then, of course, going into the rest of the year, we've got to deal with all kinds of issues with deep fakes. You might have seen there's a project called Avatarify that lets you create, Elon Musk for your Zoom calls, and presumably other folks as well. And then, of course, we've got this emerging, generative adversarial networks being able to produce, very believable looking faces, which is leading to people creating avatars for accounts. This is, this beautiful woman does not exist. You can go to thispersondoesnotexist.com to generate people for your fake avatars. In terms of disinformation that we're seeing right this second, this is from this morning. We're seeing this huge disinformation campaign around promoting division around face masks, especially in the States. And then also we've got this Boogaloo thing, which is sort of an emerging movement towards having a civil war in the United States. Although it's unclear exactly how violent it might be. It's a little bit more notional than violent at this point, but it could get worse pretty quickly. In terms of what else we're expecting in the United States this year, we're expecting election disruption in the form of both disinformation and deep fakes. Various kinds of information noise. There's a Russian term for this, infoshum, which is basically putting out a ton of information, basically really silly news stories that overwhelm your ability to evaluate what is actual real news and content. There's been a lot of talk about potential attacks on power infrastructure and other kinds of critical infrastructure email bombs, like, sending people 10,000 emails so that they can't find real stuff in their email, phishing, hack and dump attacks, and specifically attacks on election infrastructure, and then also to sow doubts about the process within the population. So where might AI be able to help in this? The truth is, with disinformation outside of the main platforms that are trying to use AI to detect some of these operations early on, it's very difficult for sort of outsiders to use AI much yet. And what we are mostly focused on within the disinformation research community right now is building kind of frameworks and infrastructure to be able to spot this stuff as it's sort of emerging out in the wild, and then be able to add metadata to it and document it so that we can then potentially interface with platforms to help them take down stuff and otherwise act on things before they become a problem. Part of the issue you might have seen with this pandemic video that was floating around a few weeks ago is that it can go from 0 to completely global in just a matter of a couple of days, and it's very difficult to put it back in the can once that happens. So getting a hook into the process sooner is key. And just like we talked about with using potentially AI to detect, the emergence of pandemic and COVID-like situations, we can also use AI to detect the spread of potentially harmful information, as well as inauthentic actors and things like that. So I think, there's a list of things I've put here that, potentially we could be using AI to do more of, but the fact of the matter is that we're still very much on the human, sort of side of this, building out human processes and we ultimately can help to automate. So if you're interested in getting involved in this community, this is one very good on-ramp called CogSec Collab and CogSec Collaborative. And, this is a group of people that basically is helping to build a framework to detect disinformation attacks, what they call left of the boom, and the boom being, when there's a problem that you can detect in society. And we're borrowing a lot of the same ideas from kind of the cyber kill chain world for this, and but it's really about cognitive security. It's about protecting what goes on in people's minds, and we can definitely use help from the AI side to help drive that. So just to wrap up, I think this is the classic blue marble image. It's very important that we keep our eyes on the planet as a whole, and our shared collective goals as humans. If we get sidetracked with weird cultish behavior within the context of our individual societies, and we're unable to act in concert together on things that actually matter, we are at severe risk as a planet. So on this last slide, I didn't want to let it go to waste. There's some really interesting books that you might find interesting on this broad set of topics, and I'd be happy to follow up with you on any of these topics, both now and later on. So again, thank you for having me, and happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Dave, thank you so much. Very, very interesting speech. Good to see you back again there. And what amazing slides as well. An incredible amount of work has gone into creating those visuals. So please do use the chat and your emojis as well, your reactions, just to say thanks to Dave there if you wish to for that speech. I've given a heads up as well to the other group that we're now moving to our next speaker. And Dave, I think if you can have a look through on the chat and just see some of the responses and the comments that were coming through, and maybe you could look into addressing some of those. And thank you again.
Absolutely.
Great. I will just move that across. So the next speaker I'm absolutely delighted to be announcing is Alice Pitarova. She focuses on AI and using it for good in her full-time work. Some of her credences, she assisted the resettlement of the ex-Guantanamo detainees into third-party countries and supported the development of the National Foundation for the Educational Research in their impact journey. I really, really wanted to get Alice to come and speak for us. She's the MD of an organization, a business called AI for Good UK, and she is here as well in London with us in the UK on the same time zone. And I said, look, come and tell us about some of these AI for Good projects that your company is working on. And so she's going to talk for about 20 minutes now about the chatbots that she's developed in helping against domestic violence and sexual and reproductive health areas too. She's also got an education program and a COVID simulator that can be used for refugee camps. So she will explain this far better than me. I'm going to invite her now to, oh, you are already unmuted. Let me see if I can spotlight your video. There you are. Alice, do you want to put any slides up?
No, I just want to talk today. Enough slides, I think. So my name is Alice. Thank you very much for a very nice introduction, by the way, Richard. So I manage AI for Good in the UK. My background, as Richard has already mentioned, is kind of in public policy, technology, impact. So I worked for a lot of nonprofit organizations, public sector, private sector organizations before joining AI for Good. And I would say that, I finally joined the company of my dream, and I'm very happy to kind of like present the work that we are doing in the area of AI for Good. So just to start, I'd like to explain that AI for Good is a social enterprise. So we are a company that creates intelligent, ethical, and scalable technology for the most vulnerable and underserved populations, which in essence means that we basically create AI-powered technologies, and to be even more specific, we create experiences using AI for people that are vulnerable, and to help them address their kind of most pressing needs, like safety, privacy, companionship, valid information and awareness, self-actualization, and just, any kind of like, need that we haven't yet built the experience for. We are considering to, basically launch products in the area of mental health, and we're really interested in the area of human trafficking. So we are very open to talk about, new different areas and discover new subject matters and build our expertise in these areas. Basically, we make it happen through sustainable partnerships with mostly charitable organizations and NGOs working on the ground. So it's really important for us that we have a partner who knows the area really, really well, because we are technologists, so we cannot be, experts in everything and anything. And our impact goal is to help 100 million vulnerable people. And in addition to that, we also would like to facilitate the development of ethical technologies. So we would like to build like an ecosystem where people like us, enthusiasts and entrepreneurs, can create AI for good projects and make them sustainable, and hopefully help more people around the world. So to support our charity partners and extend their reach and impact, we have developed a way of scaling conversations between vulnerable people and AI in areas such as domestic violence or gender-based violence in South Africa, and comprehensive sex education in India. So these are the two chatbot products that we built for this purposes. So the first one is called Rainbow. It's a digital companion for those at risk of domestic violence and other types of abuse. It was launched in South Africa in 2018. We have provided over 800,000 consultations so far to more than 18,000 users. And just generally talking about this issue, and specifically in the South African context. So as we know, 1 in 3 women have experienced sexual or domestic abuse and violence at some point in their life. And this is a worldwide statistics. So it's not just, South Africa, it's everywhere. So we need to be mindful of that. The problem is huge. In South Africa, specifically, gender-based violence is declared as a national crisis, because less than 1% of cases are being reported to police, and the femicide rate is 5 times higher than anywhere else in the world. Abuse in general is a very lonely experience, and especially in a society where there's a culture of victim blaming and shaming for reporting the abuse. It's becoming extremely hard for people not only to go to police with their issue, but even to realize that what their relationships are is unhealthy and abusive, and they should do something about it. And those experiencing abuse often lose contact with their friends, their family, so they cannot talk to anyone about this experience. And this is why we designed Rainbow, to act as a companion to support them on that journey. So Rainbow is designed to be non-judgmental And it is there to provide very honest and actionable information to those at risk of abuse. So for example, we have a quiz where we ask them, what is normal and what is not in relationships. And when they respond with the kind of like a slight, kind of indecisiveness, or like they're not sure whether, it's a correct answer or not, we just tell them, no, this is not normal. You should, take care of yourself and do something about it. And I think it's really important that, even though it's a very friendly tone of voice, so we kind of like do answer these questions in the very straightforward way, as if, your friend would do or family member would do if they would, really care about you and try to help you in this type of situations. So most of the helplines and counselors in general in domestic violence area are only available Monday to Friday, as we know, 9 to 5 p.m. And they be according to our data generated from our chatbot, we obviously can see that abuse usually happens outside of their working hours. So it's in the evenings or on the weekends. That's why like Rainbow is good that it's available 24/7. It also shows the potential victims of abuse, the early signs of abuse, and also tells them, stories and examples, of experiences lived by other people, and basically triggers them to do something, to action. And it allows ones at risk to take action whenever they are ready for it, in a kind of like a very anonymous and discreet environment. So we don't kind of like force them to do anything because first of all, it's dangerous for them. So for example, if we would tell them, leave your house immediately, it might pose actually a greater risk to the victims of the violence than just saying, try to, connect with the local service provider, try to understand, the issue, try to kind of protect yourself. At the same time, we are not kind of acting as a therapist or as a counselor or case manager in this type of situation, because obviously it is just a piece of technology. It cannot do everything. So it's just like important to understand that as well. In general, as I mentioned before, Rainbow is designed to have a friendly, not judgmental conversation and provide emotional support and information to those at risk of abuse. It was observed that the users of our chatbot are opening up and tend to trust the bot with very secretive, very kind of intimate information, which is quite surprising. But also it kind of like gives us, trust in this technology going forward. We think that, it definitely could be used for other like serious issues such as mental health and child abuse and other type of subjects that kind of require sharing some information where people usually don't want to talk about, and they don't want to label things. They don't want to label themselves as victims of such and such. So it's really important that we kind of provide this safe and discreet space for them to talk and open up and to vent sometimes and just share their experience. The chatbot gives access to relevant resources and local service providers. So we kind of connected with the local organization in South Africa, and through them we validate the service providers. So we always check, that they're actually working, that they're actually available, that their helplines are still, working, and that they will be there for our users in case something dramatic happens. And talking about COVID, we've seen like an increase, 103% increase in active users. And we also had to add like some information to our chatbot related to COVID specifically, and signpost them to this information and to helplines providing help specifically for COVID related issues. So we just wanted to be extra helpful because we saw that people started asking questions about COVID. So we thought it was important to respond, but also we understand that in general in the situation, it's really hard to escape your house because basically of the lockdown and other type of interventions and measures introduced by the government. So how can we help them even more? This is something that we are exploring right now with our community members. We had a vibrant community of AI for Gooders, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. So the second chatbot that we built for this purposes of helping our charity partners and NGOs in the specific areas is called Sneha Ai. And Sneha Ai is a chatbot that provides sexual and reproductive health education to young people and adolescents in India. So far, we have generated over 1.5 million conversations with over 38,000 young people and adolescents in India. Bear in mind, this happened in less than a year. So again, it shows us how popular our chatbot is, but also how big is the population of this country, especially young people. So the overall population of young people is estimated at 240 million in India, and only 50% of them of the age bracket between 15 and 24, to be more specific, receive sex education. So the topic still remains a taboo in many communities, and specifically in rural areas, it's pretty much impossible for young people to get any access to sexual and reproductive health education. Whilst 30% of women have had their first sexual debut before the age of 18. So the issue obviously stays there. There's a lot of obviously rape and other type of violence against young people and adolescents, which we have to keep in mind as well. So fear of judgment and stigma around sexual subject prevents adolescents from using the valid information or asking the right people, in school and in other institutions. So they go to internet, and basically the most affordable information on sexual and reproductive health is obviously from porn movies and very strange, very dodgy, I would say, websites and web resources. So there's a lot of myths about sexual and reproductive health. We, for example, have seen some really ridiculous questions coming from young people and adolescents, where they would ask, how to convince my partner to have sex with me. Maybe I should, drug them somehow. So you can see all this type of misinformation spreading across the young population. So we need to do something about it. And this is partly the mission of Sneha Ai. We also are aware of bias of certain groups of and communities, I would say, towards the subject. So sometimes people will deliberately say that there's no contraceptives or no way to protect yourself, just because it's there's a trend that having children, I would say, at a young age is okay. So we just need to make sure that this issue is prevented, and obviously providing information in the space is very, very important for us for Sneha Ai. Also, we noticed that there's a lot of questions about LGBTQ, about mental health, about some new trendy subjects that young people are talking about, and so these are the new themes that we are developing from our conversations, and we obviously try to tailor our content and constantly update it, but also update our NLP engine so it captures this request for this type of new information in the right way, and obviously flags it to us so we can respond in a timely manner with a charity partner. What else I would like to say about it is that we have a lot of rich media on this particular chatbot. So there's actually a TV series that was created by a charity partner called Dr. Sneha, and this is why the persona of the bot is called Sneha Ai. And basically the TV series are very popular in India, as you can imagine, but this specific one has a very nice tone of voice, again, very nice illustrative videos on different topics that we use in our chatbot. There's also a lot of GIFs that were created at the back of the series, and different illustrations and infographics that we can use. Why are we using this is because our users, even though they're digital first or digital natives, there's still an issue of literacy and we kind of like are also aware that young people generally like have a very short attention span. They would like to have something more entertaining, more engaging. So this is why we kind of like prefer to use more rich media on this particular chatbot to engage them more in the conversation. Another kind of like particular difference with this chatbot is that it was developed using Hinglish, and Hinglish is a Hindi transliterated into English. So like using English kind of like alphabet or letters, people are conversing in Hindi. And obviously that creates like an extra complexity for our natural language processing engine, because kind of like there are no existent like dictionaries for young people, and the language itself is like, you know, is dynamically evolving by day. So like you have to constantly update the dictionary. So we have to first of all develop it from scratch pretty much with our partners. Thank God they're like, you know, all native speakers, so it was like very helpful. But then we had to constantly, you know, adapt it and change it and fine tune it, because again, people use so many different variations of the same word, using, you know, English letters as well. So it's kind of like an extra kind of burden for us, but it's exciting and we love working on this chatbot. It also has like a very friendly and empathetic persona. So again, it's very important that, you know, the persona is kind of developed with the user in mind. So we obviously need to make sure that the tone of voice is more or less equal, and we kind of like use the same jargon, the same kind of funny words and stuff like that, so to make it more engaging for them. And finally, we have a lot of quizzes, stories, you know, mythbusters, and even small talk. And to be honest with you, lately with COVID, like we have noticed that the young people would like to chat more using small talk kind of feature with our chatbots in MKAI. I guess because they just, you know, want to talk about, you know, just random experiences during COVID, and just, you know, vent again and kind of explain their situation. So this is another kind of area for us to develop in the future. So we definitely need to kind of like look at this area a lot more. And going back to COVID, our charity partner on this project is coordinating the national response campaign. And they even like ask us to support during this difficult time. So they help the government run awareness campaign on Facebook. So it obviously brings a lot more users during this time. So yeah, it's kind of like a good thing, but also we need to be aware of the, you know, capacity, and, you know, make sure that the traffic is handled in the right way. So one thing I would like to mention in terms of you know, like the off-the-shelf AI solutions, why they wouldn't work, for example, in this particular area. And we tried them. We tried a lot of different chatbot platforms before, and to be honest, we just had to decide to build our own platform in the end of the day, because those solutions, they were either like not designed to address needs of the vulnerable people, and the other thing is that they lack the level of language understanding around the social issues that we are kind of like dealing with, because obviously it's really important that you know, we understand, we have this deep kind of like domain expertise to develop the language in the right way, to understand the people in the specific area, in the specific context, in the specific age group. So there's a lot of, you know, design going on around our products, and that's why we had to build our own platform. And aside from that, we run an educational program which is focused on introducing young people from disadvantaged communities into AI, and sparking their creativity by focusing them on solving sustainable development goals. So similar to how we do, you know, build AI for good products, we kind of focus them on how they can, you know, help the, you know, the society to solve global problems. And this has been like very, very popular. Again, we had to change and adapt during COVID. We had to launch the online version of this particular program. Before, it was all face-to-face, so it would be, you know, like a mix of different programming modules together with, you know, sustainable development goals, AI ethics, problem solving, kind of human-centered design, different like storytelling tips that we give them. Now it has to be all online. So again, it changes slightly, you know, the experience. So we had to rework it completely. And another topic that I would like to mention is that we have a community that I already mentioned, I guess, of like-minded people. Like, these are the people passionate about creating AI for good, for the better, fairer world. It is open for all. So we don't have any boundaries in terms of the background. So we don't just accept techies, we accept everyone. We think it's really important that we kind of like have the diversity, not only by, you know, gender or ethnicity or stuff like that, but also the diversity of thought. So it's really important to bring people from other subject areas and in general kind of like listen to their creativity, and, you know, they might have a completely different way of solving the same problem that, you know, we as technologists can be. And through our community, we share our knowledge of how social good and to help vulnerable people. And obviously our motto is a little less talk and a lot more action. And we tell everyone to act together. So it's really important that as a community, like work with other communities, relations. Finally, another thing that I wanted to mention is at our community, we developed a project which is called AI for Good Simulator, or COVID Simulator for refugee camps. So this was built in a hackathon, but it, like we didn't stop at the prototype level. We kind of like carried on building it further. And the project is represented right now by something like 20 international volunteers from all the parts of the world. So these are, you know, epidemiology, modeling people, data scientists, humanitarian workers, social scientists, user research, and kind of like user design experts. In essence, what we built is a web tool for NGOs to just, you know, input some information about the population size or the demographic of the area that they're managing. So for example, if it's a refugee camp, they can put like the number of people living there, like what is the age kind of like difference between all the different inhabitants, and how many of the high-risk individuals are there, so people that are particularly susceptible to COVID. And using this information, we can then add a little bit of knowledge from the kind of like key kind of research organizations in this world, like organizations like London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, like CDC, Johns Hopkins, that kind of specifically looked at those areas because they have a very unique settings. First of all, because of the density. So density is very important.
Alice, do you want to continue this into the chat? You've got
Yes.
lots of great questions coming there. You are fascinating, and I could listen to you all day, but I have got a commitment
Sure.
letting these people have some dinner. Thank you so much. You'll see so much enthusiasm there in the chat. If you could keep answering some of those questions and continue what you were saying as well,
sure,
that would be amazing.
We'll love to.
Alice,
Thank you.
You're changing the world. You made such an impact. And I bet every day doesn't feel like that, but when you summarize all of this, just magnificent. Thank you. Thanks for being an amazing human being.
Thank you.
Please join me in showing our gratitude for Alice on the chat. You've got the reactions as well, so do put those up. Alice, thank you so much. So we invite our friends to rejoin us, and I'll just text them now because we have our fourth speaker. I'm curious exactly where Rudradev Mitra is exactly now. I know he talks about being based in Palo Alto in California, Silicon Valley, but I'm sure he'll tell me if he's currently located somewhere else. I'll give his bio and then ask him to join us and unmic himself in just a moment. Though I will just make sure that I can get a wave off him. Yes, I see you, Ru. Great to see you. So he graduated at University of Cambridge, not far from Milton Keynes, and subsequently went on to build six tech startups. And he's an avid writer. He wrote his first book called Creating Value with Artificial Intelligence, Lessons Learned from 10 Years of Building AI Products. His current interest is building AI solutions for social good, hence one of the reasons that he's here. And he's a Google for Startup mentor. He's a senior AI advisor of the European Financial Management Association. And I'm honored that he's here. He's very much in demand for his time, as you might expect. and he'll tell you how many talks he's giving today, no doubt, as he introduces himself. But I just couldn't think of anything better than Roo to come on and just talk about this incredible global collaboration that he's built and continues to build. 1,000 collaborators across the world, 80 countries, 20 projects. Roo, thank you so much for coming to join us today. I'm going to spotlight you. You've got 20 minutes. The stage is yours. Welcome.
Hey, cool. Thanks, Richard. Can I share the screen? We have a presentation which I can give.
Yeah, sure. Let me open that up for you. There you go.
And I am in Warsaw, actually, just to let you guys know. So this is so I'll give you a quick presentation of what we are doing. And you guys can see my screen, I presume, right? It might go a bit over 20 minutes. So please stop me if it goes beyond that. So I think that I want to talk more about I want to talk about building AI for success rather than social good. And I'm trying to avoid using the word AI for good, because over the last 1 year, what I have seen that whenever I talk about AI for good, people immediately put us like, oh, you're an NGO kind of doing something, and I don't mind AI for good, but I think that invariably the AI for success is also AI for good. And we had this kind of interesting podcast or a call with Richard, we were talking about what is good and what is not good. So I'm going to talk about AI for success more, actually. So briefly about my background, just Richard quite well summarized it. I started as an AI researcher way back in 2002. Worked on various topics of AI, published research papers. Then I was an entrepreneur, and then I call myself an educator because I love speaking, I love mentoring, I love writing. And over the last 1 year, what has kept me really busy is building Omdena, and that's the story I'm going to tell you. So my outline for today is basically, I want to first of all say why most AI fails. And then I will argue that how to build AI for success. And I'll give you examples of some of the work that we have done. I'm happy to go and explain some more. Like I cannot go on and talk about all this 24, we just kind of signed 2 more. So it's kind of growing every day. Say around 20 plus projects. So of course, I'll give you some examples. And I'll argue why the model that we are following works. And then finally make some conclusions. So perhaps most of you know that up to 87% of all AI projects actually fail to production. And that's really, really amazing, right? Because I just had today a call with the senior management of Allianz, and they say, oh, we have 500 data scientists, why do we need someone like you guys? And I'm like, well, you might have all the data science and all the engineers, but still the AI projects end up being failing. And there's something fundamentally wrong in how the systems are being built. And what I realized and there was a story behind that I will skip to in this presentation, but basically what I realized that after various experiences working with banks and things that, and big tech companies, is that there is a lack of inclusiveness. So when, for example, when Amazon, they built a solution that was to hire for the hiring of employees or tech engineers, it ended up being sexist because the people who were building the solution were mostly male. They didn't realize that the data was biased and that solution was sexist. And it has happened, many tech companies over and over again has built solutions that were unethical or that has problems. And the reason for that is basically the lack of inclusiveness or lack of diversity in the team. And of course, in the real world, because of certain factors, the data also is biased. So no one is there to point them out that, look, the data is biased, so you have to kind of unbias the data before you can actually build a model on top of that. So that's one of the main reasons. The second reason is the process, actually. So one is the people, and second is the process. So often these companies that follow build solutions, big companies, small companies, they follow a very non-agile, typical waterfall kind of model. And so many banks, for example, big companies I've spoken to, and they say, we want to build a great solution, so we are trying to inbuild startup environments. So what we do is we put some beanbags so that people can just sit on the beanbags and they can wear whatever they want to wear. So hopefully these people will end up building solutions that will also be like startup, which doesn't work really. Like, if you really want to build startup mentality, then you have to not only bring beanbags and kind of wear whatever you want, but you actually have to build the processes that basically typically startups have. which most people don't have it unless you have really built startups, actually. The kind of how do you build products in a very fast way and test those products. And the third thing, which actually causes failures, is that unfortunately, we live in a world which is driven by competition. And even in companies, big companies, small companies, they're all driven by competing. So they have this, create this silo. So each of the departments, one department is doing something, they don't share knowledge, exchange what they have, what they know, and that ends up creating solutions that are very, for example, not taking the full knowledge and not taking into account all the people and all the knowledge that is out there. And I think these are the three main reasons that causes most failures of AI systems. So the question is, okay, once we realize that, okay, it's a problem of the people and the process, actually, we have to change that. And in fact, just before this talk, I was giving a talk in data science meetup in Macedonia, and one of the guys said that he read an article in MIT which said that 90% of the problems could be solved by the right process and the people. The technology is only the 10%, which I completely agree, especially in AI. I think the technology is one of the least important thing, actually. I mean, it is important, but it's not like rocket science anyway. So what we are saying, I'll just minimize this thing, that what we really need to do, if an organization wants to build AI solutions, and for good, when I said good, I mean for success, that people will use it, which invariably I think is good, actually. Then we need a more collaborative development process, which is with and for all, which includes everyone. And then it will definitely then build AI, which is trustable, ethical, and efficient. Oops. And in fact, it was quite, I have been talking about this process, this way of building solutions for, at least 1 year, maybe more than 1 year. And I think it's not just about having some females or some males. It's truly basically a very diverse group. And with all, I don't mean just having a diversity for the sake of it. It's basically people with different knowledge, different backgrounds. That's the key here. And in fact, McKinsey came up with this article 3 weeks ago, actually, and I read about it, and I was like, oh, they're taking that, how do you build AI with and for everyone? And they're arguing that if you really want to build AI solutions, what you have to really do is to build AI with and for everyone. And I think, okay, I personally think that's great that they come to finally the realization of that, but well, I don't think they are the one who could actually build that kind of solution, which is with and for all. And so, as I said, the key to, if we want to build some AI solutions that are for success, that people will use it, and that will all invariably also be good, ethical, inclusive, then we need the right people, we need the right processes, and we need the right technology. It has three aspects of it. And as I before said, people and process defined 90% of that, and I think technology defines the 10% of that. And that's what we have done. What we have been able to achieve over the last 1 year, it's now 14 months, 14 months, is that we had over 1,200 collaborators that have, and domain experts that have come together from 82 now, by the way, countries and 21 projects that have, for a given period of time, they come and they work together and build a solution together. And who are these people that I'm talking about? Whenever I tell this story to people, they say, oh, there are some students who are coming and they have some free time doing some open source code. And I completely say, no, first of all, the model is not a kind of typical open source model where anyone just come in and go. We actually enforce quality, we enforce the certain hours, we enforce everything. And I will go and explain some of the models that we have built. Some of the models are actually even better than what I can claim Google has built. So it's not just like, some people coming together and doing something. There's a proper structure to all of that. There's proper processes and tools that we have doing. But give you some example, who are these people? And these are people who are extremely active. So I'm not just taking pictures of people and saying, oh, these are some of the faces. Each of them are extremely active in have been working with it. For example, Anil, she works in Google, or Xavier, he's actually a professor in a business school, or we have doctors, we have data scientists from Microsoft, we have people from Deloitte. I mean, really a range of people from different parts of the world, different backgrounds, different experiences coming together. And in fact, we are so diverse that I think I claimed, I put a post like a week ago or a week and a half ago that we can perhaps claim the only data science company or a platform where there are 35% are lead machine learning engineers are females. And there is a structure to how people are, they move up the tier, but it's completely organic. So it's not like they are by somehow, that I want X percent of women. It's just that organically, if you create such an environment where people are given equal opportunities, then we see that 35% of them are female, 30 to 35% collaborators are female. They come from all the countries, all the continents, and the age varies from 17 to 65. Typically, a lot of these are in mid-30s. So that's really, really, we bring a very diverse group of people who come together. And they are selected through a rigorous selection process. It's not just like when we, for example, post a problem that we want to solve, at least we get few hundred applicants in the first in the first week. So there is a selection process which goes to them, and then based on that, these people are selected. And we have worked with a lot of companies, right? Like I put some of those, for example, Foundation Partner, which is, I think, $2 or $3 or $4 billion foundation based in Switzerland. We have worked with World Energy Council, World Resource Institute. Safe City is a great NGO based in India. And we have also like startups, SMEs, and have been also covered in the FOB, the Next Web, and some other IEEE spectrum. And that's what we have seen. And we see that this model that we're talking about, and I do talk about it, I do write about it as much as I can, is getting a lot of interest in the recent time. In the last 4 weeks, we got 4 organizations that want to agree to work with us, that are going to work from the US, Switzerland, Israel. We are talking with finally the Shell. They reached out and they think that we are the right partner from them. UN headquarters, they want to work with us. So we get lots of in the last few days interest. So we see that what we have been able to do really clicks with people. It's a simple, on the paper, it looks a very simple model. Bring the right people, provide the right process, and make them solve the problem. And that's simple as that. An example of the work that we did, I just want to give you a few examples. I will not go too much technical details, but happy to elaborate if anyone wants me to explain. So for example, we worked in Nepal with World Food Program on classifying different types of crops. Or we worked with a startup in Sweden where they said that one of the biggest problems that energy companies or the overhead, the companies that own the overhead distribution, they face is the trees, that they fall on top of the overhead cables. And we built a model with a 95% accuracy to identify individual trees through satellite images. We worked with in Brazil, with an SME to identify forest fire. Well, it was more like a forest smoke, not the fire, but because the smoke comes first before the fire. So, and these are sophisticated models. These are deep neural network models. We use deep UNet, we used Mascard CNN. So these are like, and we had to gather the data, we had to train the data, attack the data. So all of this work is with 2 months of work, basically. Or we worked on natural language processing also, where I will go and talk about the Chicago gang violence next, for example, where we were trying to understand how gangs communicate, what are they talking about, and if there's a correlation between what gangs are talking in Twitter and actual violence that's happening in the real world. And I'll just give one presentation on that. Or we work with the World Resource Institute on understanding land conflicts and policies in India. So what has happened, they said that around the world, and also in India, people do not understand why land conflicts are happening, what causes them, and what are the policies that affect it. And we build a model which actually they told that they're using it not only in India, but they're using it in Indonesia, and I think also in Brazil. We work with World Energy Council to understand public sentiments towards energy transition. So this is the work that I was talking about briefly in terms of the Twitter. I get a lot of people asking this question, that's why I thought I would add a slide on that. So what we did is we basically, first of all, understood the language that gangs are using, because gangs don't use typical English, they use their own language. And then we try to understand if there's a correlation between the actual number of actual crimes and the number of times a gun is used in the tweet. And on the same day, we didn't find any correlation, but with the 2-day shift, we saw that, that there is a correlation. So it shows that gangs are kind of, perhaps tweeting to each other, using some abusive languages with guns and threatening, and then in 2 days, the actual violence is happening. And this was with an organization based in Chicago, which is working with the FBI and local government. And we not only analyzed the correlation, but we also built a network analysis, which is basically understanding which gangs are talking. Because at the end, gangs, when gangs are threatening, we since they stay within their own area, so we can kind of predict where potentially our next violence will happen. On the other hand side, we work with, for example, in Nigeria with a NGO that when they came to us and they said, one of the problems that they face that the policymakers in Nigeria are, they don't think that they need solar power. So how can we convince them to use solar power? And what we did is we looked at Nigeria, we looked at what is at night, how many parts of Nigeria is dark. So, and then looked at what are the areas in Nigeria that is more than 15 kilometers away from the grid. So even if you create a lot of energy, coal power, these people or these areas which are away from the grid will not get the electricity. And we saw that then we identified places which are, have big population. So then you can show that map, and this map is actually online, and they're actually using this online and going to policymakers. And in fact, Adimalo said he wrote in I think LinkedIn, said it basically changed their lives, because what he said that now they can go to policymakers and show that, look, you need to apply a solar power, because it's not a question anymore about good or bad. It's just about that these are the people, no matter how much coal you will generate, they will never get that coal power because they are not in the grid, or they are away from the grid. So that, and we work with UNHCR also on trying to understand the correlation between climate anomalies and conflicts. So we actually saw that there is a correlation. So what happens that whenever there is a climate anomalies, like mostly droughts, and when the drought happens, then we see that within I think within a month, there's an increase of conflicts. So again, this is something that could be used, is perhaps being used by UNHCR to kind of understand where could be the next conflict if there is a drought, so that they can avoid conflicts and save lives. We also worked on AI planning. I'm just giving some snippets of some of the work that we did without going into too much details. But for example, in the AI planning which we worked was on Istanbul. I'll go in that one after this. But in India we worked, which was very interesting work, is an organization called Safe City, and they have around 15,000 data points on people reporting on sexual violence or sexual harassment. And we build a safe route algorithm, so that whenever someone reports about a sexual harassment that they are facing, that path they will get in their app, the path to go from reach to the safe area, which is based on the amount of like the time, because there are patterns in what are the safe areas in the city at what time, and the nearest, for example, the police station or the hospital or the train station or the metro station. So, and that is actually they are implementing that inside in the app that they already have that people are using to report. So I mean, there's the Istanbul one I was talking about it. So this was interesting work also, that this was with Impact Hub, and they said one of the challenge they want to build is when an earthquake hits in Istanbul, that they want to know how to reach from point A to point B. What is the safest route to reach from point A to point B? And so what we did is we initially thought, okay, we can use OpenStreetMap data, which was insufficient. So instead of that, we analyzed the satellite images. We tried this Fateh. Fateh is one of the most densest area in the city and district in the city. And then based on that, we created a heat map of the buildings. And then from the heat map, we generated a safe route. So we know that if an earthquake hits, a safe route would be the one which goes away from the densely populated area. So, and you can see here, the blue line is the one what Google was recommending from point A to point B, which is of course the shortest distance. And our algorithm was bypassing the dense areas and kind of giving another alternative algorithm. And actually, the Next Web wrote an article about it called "This AI Could Reunite Families After Earthquake." I thought it was a great article title for for what we did. So I think these are the different. I mean, currently I wanted to show you what are the work that we are doing before I can go into this. So quickly, I will show you. Maybe you can see my screen. So currently, for example, we are running 4 projects. So one is on fighting illegal dumping. So this is with a Slovakian NGO that have data points, around 55,000 data points of people reporting illegal dumping. So they want to understand the patterns, and also they want to build a model that would help people know when they have an object, what kind of category they should put that into for recycling, for example. We are working with Arizona State University that we just finished on understanding sentiments of the youth. this was interesting work that we did is on domestic violence in India during COVID. So we tried to understand what are the effects on domestic violence in India during the COVID times, during the lockdown. So these are the different things that are currently working. There's an upcoming couple of projects, so that's all in our website. Anyway, so coming back to the point is why this model works actually, and this is something people like, to me it's, oops, sorry. This is something I cannot make it. Give me a second. This works like this. Okay. So the thing is why this model works. So, and even for me, to be very honest, when I started this thing, I was not sure how this will all work out. This was just an idea that I had and said, let's try it out. And it was very well described in one guy at a very early, one of the first project that we did. It is Vajko, he was from Croatia. He wrote a beautiful piece. And one of the things that he said that this model works because it's truly a bottom-up self-organized environment where the crucial conclusions and the optimal solutions emerge as winners. So initially it's a complete chaotic environment, but then the right decisions and the best models win, which is actually, that's the create that because of this diversity of group. For example, when we were doing the Somalia project, I remember we had someone from Somalia who is a refugee in Kenya, and she was kind of giving a lot of context to the problems that they're facing that would help the people around the world to kind of build the model. And often the best decision, the best solution is not necessarily the best technical solution. The best solution is you have to take into context and the people that are going to use it. And what we have seen that, when we use this kind of collaborative environment, we end up building very fast, the best model wins. We are able to build ethical, inclusive, and trustable solutions. And at the end, we also are really reskilling and upskilling the collaborators. This is, again, something that I didn't personally expect, but tons of people, if you follow us in LinkedIn, you'll see tons of people write about us, that how much they learned, how much they did in these 2 months. And that's very, very valuable in today's world.
Hey, let's start the Q&A with you, because we're just running down the clock here. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So,
I just have 3 slides more, but yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe you can weave them in, but if I just ask you for a couple more minutes and then we'll bring the rest of the panel back in, otherwise we're literally going to run the clock down. Lucy says, what's your recruitment criteria and employment model that's enabled you to have such a diverse and global team?
I'm sorry?
She says, what's the criteria you have for recruitment and employment that's got this diversity? How have you done it?
Okay, so there is different criteria. We try to understand the intrinsic motivation, the extrinsic motivation, the time commitment, the technical skills, and the ability to take initiatives. So there are different metrics that we try to analyze someone based on that, and there are different ways that we do that. But these are the 5 factors that we take into account before selecting someone.
Great, thank you so much. Do you want to just close for 30 seconds, then we'll move to the panel? Have you got something you want to wrap up and say?
No, I just want to share that, like, how much, that what is basically the value that on one side, people said they learned a lot of things in 2 months and how much they learned, and on the other side, we can also see that how much benefit it is for the organization. So we are basically solving the both sides of the puzzle in a very, very effective way, which I think that's a future that we need to build, where you have to use collaboration, you have to reskill the people, and you have to build solutions that social value if you really want to build something which is kind of tangible value and for good and adaptable.
Yeah. That's amazing. I feel the passion as well. I'm sure everybody else does on the line. So thank you so much for sharing that, giving us some of your valuable time. Please do show some appreciation for us as well on the chat with your reactions as well for that talk. We've got questions flowing in. I really don't know how many we're going to be able to manage. Daniel, can you unmute yourself? I think you've got a question for Dave if he's still on the line.
Yes, yeah, Dave. Thank you so much for the talk. It was really, really interesting. I've done a little bit of work. I study at the London School of Economics, so in misinformation, disinformation. So my question in general was, obviously in the talk that you discussed the difference about misinformation, disinformation specifically being about the intent to harm. So how do you really distinguish between the two when you identify content online, between misinformation and disinformation? And really, is there a point in doing so? And also, like, I guess just to follow up, should social media users then be equally reprimanded, I guess, or whatever extent you can actually, do to chastise them, I guess? Should they be equally reprimanded, for unknowingly spreading misinformation compared to actively, spreading disinformation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult set of problems. Teasing it apart, sort of requires a decent amount of knowledge of the space and, knowing what kind of patterns exist, but being able to trace things to like, origins. I'll give you a weird example. There's a Facebook group called Taste Life, which is all about, little cooking videos, and it looks harmless enough, and it's got like 25 million followers, and it's run by the Falun Gong, which is this, Chinese cult. And it's kind of like, why is the Falun Gong aggregating a 25 million, viewer site on cooking videos? That's weird. So like, stuff like that also kind of falls into these weird middle grounds where it's kind of, they're doing what amounts to an audience aggregation operation first, and then may or may not deploy harmful payloads through those channels that may or may not look like disinformation or misinformation or propaganda or God knows what. So, there's a lot of different kind of stuff out there. So, it does help from a forensic standpoint to be able to differentiate between stuff that's just, goofy rumors versus stuff that's really, sponsored by some entity with some specific intention in mind. And then, in terms of chastising folks, I tend to frame it more in terms of just educating. Like if you let people know that something is being produced with the intention of causing division in society, and you can prove that it's tied to, a state actor or something, they're much less likely to, then go and share it out. And they also will not necessarily dispute the truth of the payload as so much as, what is trying to be done there. So just broader societal education about this stuff, I think, is also very useful.
Dave, thanks. Daniel, thanks. Niraj, do you want to ask your question? Are you still there?
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
Who's it aimed at?
So it was anyone could answer. The question was, which is the biggest challenge you guys have faced? Is it defining a clear vision, or finding the right technology, or finding time and money, or is it something else? If you could just share which is the biggest challenge you shared and how you overcame that.
If we can start with a quick word from John, perhaps, on that, and then get Alice's views and see how we're doing for time, if that's okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, good. You're still there, John. Great.
Yeah, I mean,
James.
the biggest challenge that we faced was really merging the right technology with the social cultural issues that we were facing, and also convincing people that partnership was the way forward. Because once we're able to do that, as we're doing right now in a practical perspective with our platform, for example, we see that we can get a lot of things done without even having physical cash, or without necessarily. So I mean, those things themselves equate to money, and I like to talk about practical things. So the way we started a month ago officially with our beta, and the scale at which we have had has taken us so far because of understanding the social cultural issues, being able to convince folks the partnership as a form of collaborative growth makes more sense, means we don't have to worry too much about money we don't have, but extract the value of what we have, which also equates to money, and create win-win ecosystems. So that's been our biggest challenge so far.
Thanks, John. Alice, do you want to recap of the question, or do you remember Niraj's question?
To be honest, I completely agree with John. I would say that, it's not just convincing partners to kind of like collaborate in the first place, but it's also to convince them that using this technology is a greater benefit than risk, because usually they see it as a risk kind of like factor, because first of all, they don't really know the outcomes. They cannot really expect anything specific because usually they haven't used it before. So they can't really see the benefits straight away. Usually they see the huge risk factor of like a lot of money being spent and not so much impact. So we have to do a lot of work of on educating them how to use AI to kind of like bring the best results, and also how to communicate these results to their funders, for example. So this is usually kind of the biggest challenge for us.
Thanks, Alice. Paul Levy, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, it's a very simple one, really. There's a lot of great stories we're hearing, and it is possible to measure good, and we've been doing that for a long time, particularly in development and charity work. Are you already, as more use cases of this develop, able to identify which aspects of the AI that you bring in are actually having a measurable impact on the good that you're doing?
Anyone in particular? Should we ask Ruth to answer that one?
Well, I think that I haven't really thought about an answer, but I think that the way I'll say that answer is that it's the best way to drive the impact is how much it is being adopted. What's like any startup, like if you're building a product, build AI like build your startup. I always say that, if your solution and technology is being adopted, is being used, then it's good and it's success. If it's not adopted and if you're just building something that no one is using, then it's a failure. And that's the way I will define a success, actually.
I mean, I'd say possibly to add to what Rua said. I mean, we think about, first of all, building a solution that affects the life of people, or at least affects some kind of change, which is still commercially viable. There's no problem with that. Then in doing that, then we then figure out what part of the solution actually needs any AI or machine learning, and how much machine learning or AI does this solution need, and at what time. And that's kind of how we approach the significance, the outcome, and what the effect is for people, because the solution itself is the first thing that affects their lives. And I give you a practical example. If people are, in savings group in an informal financial ecosystem, and the first thing you do is you digitize them and you give them visibility and you make them credit worthy, that makes sense. So when you start layering artificial intelligence or AI around credit score, precision marketing, dynamic pricing, all on top of that, then they value that a bit more. But if you just jump into AI, the guy on the street has no interest in what you're talking about. It doesn't make any sense to him.
Thanks, John. Kat, are you ready with your question?
So I believe my question was to John, and it was what kind of cultural awareness to take into consideration when trying to teach people the value of following AI analyzed data.
Thanks, Kat. Again, let's take COVID, for example, which is the situation we're in right now. In one of the places, I'm not going to mention names, somebody was beaten up because they found out that he had COVID in one of the Africa. He was literally almost lynched to death because the people in his community found out that he had COVID, and everything they've heard about COVID is the fact that, it kills people, he's going to contaminate, it was just literally, it was a really sad situation. Now, in that same community, if you now tell them that Google has developed a product that allows you to contact trace and use AI to do what, literally nobody in that community is going to go anywhere near that product. So now, first understanding and saying, okay, well, if I wanted to build a contact tracing solution for these people based on AI, let me take, first of all, the social, cultural situation into consideration to maybe make sure I don't actually tell them that this platform is going to tell another person that another person has this. Maybe just protect them and say, maybe if you enter a location, it might just make you aware that this location is high risk. Those type of things, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. John and Kat, any follow-up questions to that? No? Okay. Alex, did you want to ask something? No, I think he might have left, actually. Okay. Who else would like to unmute and ask a question?
Sorry, Richard, if there's no questions, can Alice also answer the same? Because she's working with international communities as well.
Yeah, of course. So in general, kind of our approach is very similar to what John just said. We do focus a lot on understanding the local context and the societal norms and values, because it is really important to do the right job at it, and like do it early enough, because it might lead to some unintended consequences, like most of the time negative. So similarly to facial recognition technology, or even like when we as a society of data scientists, we tend to kind of like make a lot of predictions because we have tools at our disposal and we can use them to just say, okay, let's isolate everyone during the COVID pandemic, right? But then in urban areas, in urban kind of like slum areas, or in refugee camps where we work, the isolation wouldn't really help, first of all, because it's practically impossible, or it can also lead to the issue of food insecurity and a bigger crisis. And a bigger amount of deaths, because the only way people can get food is by going to food distribution places, or sometimes just picking trash in some areas, and yeah, by isolating them and locking them down, is not doing greater good for them, to be honest. So there should be some viable solutions outside of this. So even though the data and math tells us yes, we should do isolation and lockdown, we shouldn't kind of like overlook other kind of interventions and other strategies that might be more suitable for this particular area or this particular community. So I think it's really important that we always kind of challenge ourselves, and that's why the diversity is so important. That's why you need to bring people that are suffering from this problem the most into kind of like this co-creation environment, where you develop tools with them and for them, and not just deciding what is good for them without like actually listening to their needs and understanding. So similarly, how we kind of did it with the domestic violence chatbot. At first we thought, okay, let's build a reporting tool because reporting seems to be so important. But then we realized that the bigger issue is not reporting. The bigger issue is to say to yourself, to admit it, that what you're experiencing is not okay. And yeah, this type of experience only comes after the user testing and user kind of experience research. So we have to do it all the time.